This is Devin, the romantic traveler, and actually that may change sooner than we think. This whole sort of marketing thing I don't quite get, and friends keep giving me different suggestions of where to go and what to do in terms of the name, and I don't know. I mean, I kind of like the romantic traveler, and some people are suggesting things like the love Kabbalah guy or something like that. If you have an opinion, let me know at the bottom of this page of what you think I should call myself. But that's, oh my God, that's totally setting myself up for like some total messed up comments. I hope that doesn't go that direction, but whatever. So anyway, you're catching me on sort of a Tuesday night rather than Wednesday at noon. I have stuff to do. Matter of fact, I'm a little bit beat up. I'm a little bit disheveled today. As you can tell, not quite shaven and a little sweatshirty and all that kind of stuff. No disrespect intended. It's just there is some work I have to take care of in Los Angeles rather than my wonderful home in Long Beach. And so I thought I would get a jump on the gun. So if nothing else, I could get you guys a tape of something on time. So I'm doing it prior to. As most of you know, we are on our third installment of the 5 love and relationship killers, stuff that we do as human beings that prevent us from finding love and happiness in a great long-term love-lasting relationship. So as you might remember, we kind of got pretty general on our first episode. The second episode, we sort of jumped into the ideas of fantasy and how that can kind of detract us. In other words, the wonderful people that we create in our minds, this perfection of idealism. Matter of fact, it was so interesting. I was talking with a young guy today about his need to have sort of like the hottest girl in the world in his life. And, we talked about some of these ideas that, the more you're carrying around that magazine image in your head out into the world, you're going to make it impossible to find a great relationship if you're focused on sort of images of people that you can't, they don't exist. Even the person in the magazine doesn't really exist after Photoshop and airbrushing and things like that. So you want to try to understand that fantasy has the good side, which is a plan, a conscious action towards what your vision for the future is. There's a lot of good stuff that can come from that, but if it's a knee-jerk reaction to sort of like a default mechanism in your head of how a person's supposed to be, how they'll react, how they'll be, in a relationship at all times without any flexibility for them to be human, then you're probably going to be, you're probably making it really hard on them, and you're going to make it really hard on yourself because it's going to be very, very difficult for anybody to measure up. Anyway, moving along, as I told you last week, we were going to talk a little bit about history. And the history really, in French, bagage, or your personal baggage, is one of the biggest things that I hear about. And I hear about it in 2 different ways. The first way is that there was some person in your past who was pretty terrible. They didn't treat you well. They didn't treat you with love or respect. Sometimes it was really ugly, like criminal kinds of things. I speak to a lot of people about their past with things like molestation and other truly awful experiences. Sadly, it's all too common. But the point is that sometimes we as people take these specifically awful experiences and we lock them away inside of us, where we feel unsafe, unloved, sometimes unlovable. That's one side. On the other side is that there is somebody in your past who was really like, they got away, they went off to college, they got transferred out of state, and we idolize this person. We've kind of created where they are too good to be true. They never had any faults. The relationship maybe wasn't long enough to see any of the foibles. They sort of broke up through unexplained circumstances. At a point where there was still like the bloom was on the rose. And in either case, it's very hard for anybody to compare. On the one hand, if something really awful happens, sometimes it can just be all men suck. And when that goes down, it's very difficult, because even if Mr. Right or Ms. Right show up, it's going to be really difficult for anybody to even see it, to see that right person show up that's standing right in front of them, because we've taken this bad experience and we've magnetized it so it exists in all cases, that all men are bad. I mean, one of the things that I didn't, when I started doing this, one of the things that I found really interesting in letters that I've received women and women that I've worked with is that they sometimes just need to kind of be interacting with a guy who doesn't match their bad history. They want to know that they're good guys running around, honest guys, guys with integrity, guys that are capable of love and commitment. And I promise you, there's way, way, way more out there than what you will imagine, mostly because we've taken these bad experiences and we've become very, very wary. Matter of fact, so wary that it's hard to get beyond our own histories, our own baggage, to get to sort of the good stuff. So what's the answer to that? Well, we're going to get to that in just a second. So before we get to that answer, understand that the other side isn't all that reasonable either. That good side, like, yes, there was this great guy, and yes, why didn't things work out with that great guy or that great woman? And somehow they moved, or there was a transfer, there was school, or a high school sweetheart, or some sort of relationship that was overly idyllic in the mind of the person. You know, looking back, like, I mean, I can say there was a woman named Elise Hughes when I was 6 years old who could do no wrong. And she was in my first grade class. I have no idea what happened to her, but I mean, when I look back, I think that's the only person I can really look back and go, oh, I think they were a perfect person. Anyway, Elise, if you're watching this, yep, I'm married, happily so. You know, I hope you are too. So, either way, what we're doing is we're creating scenarios, and I personally think it has a lot to do with self-worth. Those seem to be sort of like the underlying issues that if you've been victimized by somebody, that you take that victimization out into the universe with you and you sort of perpetuate it as if that awful thing was something that was somehow endemic as part of you, and that, you know, it's hard to get your self-worth up to a place where you're actually deserving of love. And I can tell you for an absolute fact that you absolutely 100% are. If you do identify with somebody who has a bad history with men, I can absolutely assure you there's loads of great guys. As a matter of fact, most of my close personal friends are in married, long-term relationships with kids. They're watching them grow, they're raising them, and they are happy to be at home with their spouses. So I want you to know in your heart that there are right people out there for you. There are good guys, there's great women that are available, and that you are absolutely deserving to have one of those great people in your life. So be kind to yourself, and understand if you are feeling sort of like that you've had this history that you can't overcome, absolutely get some professional help. If that's something that's not part of the cards for you, then I'm going to highly recommend that you start taking some alternative action. action that's probably not all that use or common for you. Frequently we talk about sort of like the tree of life, and this is probably the best model that I can think of, is that this section here that is the furthest away from, shall we say, the divine or your highest nobility or the cosmic ooze or whatever. This is sort of our physical universe. So we're supposed to not really see all this great, wonderful stuff at the top of the tree. If you're down here and you're thinking there's no men for you, there's no love, there's no women for you, you can't find it, there's nothing you can do, then again, it's time to really sort of sit down and get out of that reactive mode. Like if you're sitting here right now, I want you to make a list of all of your wonderful qualities because you have them and it's time to be kind for yourself. But you need to start seeing yourself less so as the victim of somebody who has hurt, abused, had a series of unhappy, unsatisfying relationships, and start really getting in touch with all of your highest nobilities, all the stuff, all the great love that you actually are, and start living that way out in the universe. Walk out the front door. If you need to, say affirmations in the mirror. Absolutely claim how wonderful, how unique, how lovable you are, and know that there's the great person out there for you. And there is a part, the whole Kabbalistic universe, there's a certain magical element to this. And when you start setting intentions that are clear and focused, you will be amazed at the miracles that are capable of happening in your life. So start looking at yourself if you've been, if you feel like you've been a victim of the opposite sex or a victim in relationships, then start focusing on this part, your highest ability, get in touch with how fantastic you are, and start living that with the understanding that, listen, sometimes you're just paired up with the wrong person, or sometimes you're paired up with a person who's intending consciously or unconsciously to give you a lesson. And so it's time to overcome those lessons. I absolutely know for a fact you can do it. But what if you are focusing on some sort of distant, you're Elise Hughes from first grade or second grade or junior high or that guy that you worked with in the cubicle down the hall before he got transferred overseas. Just understand that, when we talk about soulmates, we've talked about the numbers in the past. The numbers are astronomical in terms of how many souls there are, and how many of those souls are sort of like on your branch, as it were, on your limb of many, many possibilities for finding somebody who's completely appropriate. So understand, the goal isn't finding the single soulmate. It's finding somebody who's going to be a right connection and a right partner with you. So just because you had one great love, just because you had a 40-year relationship and through unfortunate circumstances you're no longer together, it's time to start, again, being grateful for what your history is and go out and continue to find love in your life by, again, just going outside. And what I would ultimately say is that you want to start looking at relationships as spiritual goals. Having somebody else out there to witness your successes and your failures, somebody who's going to be on your team, and ultimately somebody who's going to work out your bullshit with you. Did I say bullshit on YouTube or Google Hangouts? I sure hope so. So no matter what side of the bagage, in French, if you will, you happen to be standing on, know that there's absolutely solutions. I definitely think you should, if you're feeling abused by love, it's time to start making a list of all of your wonderful qualities and own them. Own the fact that your history is in the past. There is a great line, there's a difference between pain and suffering. Pain is something that, like, you step on a tack and it's going to hurt. If you are still worried about that tack that you stepped on in 1984, then that's suffering. Stop suffering and get connected with the notion of how wonderful you are, and do it today. Anyway, that's all I have for right now. I think we're going to be talking about, I'm supposed to do this in big marker, but next week we're going to talk about those who are mind readers. And we're going to have some fun because there's lots to take a look at when we're talking about gets in between us and love. So until then, I hope you're having a fantastic week, and I'll look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks so much.